Hello 3 designers, this is Joshua St. John, 3Design NYC on the forum, and welcome to another installment of our video demonstration series. Today's demonstration is going to begin a multi-part unit called Solid Module Fundamentals. We're going to walk parameter by parameter through all of the different solid module functions under the Construct toolbar and show you the nuts and bolts of what these tools do and how they work. Today we're going to focus on extrusion and revolve. So let's not waste any more time and hop right in and start looking at the extrusion function in the solid module. Now I've opened up 3Design and I'm in my root screen, and I'm going to start off by creating a new part. And once in the workspace, I'm going to select the top view plane and put a sketch on that plane. Next, I'm going to select circle and choose the center 000 as a starting point and draw a radius of 4 millimeters and then validate and go back into the solid module. I'm going to click on extrusion and it brings up my extrusion properties in the lower left hand side of my screen. First thing we see is material. I have 18 karat gold selected. Second thing, caps ends. We'll get back to that later. That has to do with surface versus solid modeling. And curves to extrude. This is the first thing that we're going to look at. You notice I have a list with nothing on it and a plus sign. I'm going to hit the plus sign and choose the circle. Now you see, if I hit the eyeball, you begin to see this circle being extruded. I'm going to X out of it and this time pre-select the circle and choose extrude. That automatically places the circle into my curves to extrude list. So we have two options on how to load curves to extrude. One is to pre-select it and then choose the function extrude. Second is to choose the function first and then hit the plus sign and add the circle. This carries over to almost every function that we have. Now that we have the circle chose, we're going to look at sweeping direction. If I look at it from the front view, using my compass, side view, front view, you see my circle is going straight up and the Z value is 1. If I change the X value, you see it begins going to the side. And if I turn it from the side view and I adjust the Y value, it goes from front to back. Interesting to note, if I change this back to 0, I have to go through all of them and change them back to 0 in order to get Z back to 1. If I was to try to type 1 into X now, it splits the difference between the two. So if I want the Z to be 1, I need to hit 0 on the X. The other thing to note is that there's these blue dots just next to the direction. So notice the sweeping direction is Z1 now. If I click on the dot, it's going to change it to -1. Click back, it turns it to 1. Click on the Y, turns it to 1. Again, -1. And this is a nice little tip and a shortcut to set the values back to 0 without having to type in multiple fields. I'm going to pull it up farther and change and validate. And you see I get a straight extrusion of the circle. If I adjust the XY value, it comes to the side, like so. So it's still a straight extrusion, it just has a different direction assigned to it. Looking just below sweeping direction, we have sweeping distance. Now, as I pull up and down on the black arrow, you'll notice that the sweeping distance value increases and decreases. Like all 3Design functions, There are widgets on the screen or visuals, arrows that you can pull. And then there's also numerical values. So if I wanted to set this to 10 millimeter, I right click by hitting the right mouse button or hitting tab, and it sets the value to 10. I'm going to change the Z back to 1 and preview. And now I get a 10 millimeter extrusion of that circle with the direction Z of 1. If I change the Z value to -1, I'm going to get the same extrusion but in the opposite direction. Change it back to 1, and I will look at the next tab down. We have taper. Taper just as it seems. If I change the angle to 5 degrees, preview that, I get a tapered extrusion. Change it to 20 degrees to illustrate it. And you see I can switch the direction by choosing outward direction. Validate that now, and I get an extrusion like this. If I turn taper off, one more option pops up called both sides. If I turn both sides on, I get an extrusion going in both directions. The distance, it's important to note the distance is 10 millimeter, but the total length is 20 millimeter because of the both sides. To change that, I can turn off symmetric, and it gives me a second distance. So I'll make it 5 millimeter. And now the total extrusion distance is 15 millimeter. Let's take a look at one more feature of extrusion, and that's extruding multiple curves. If I select both of these curves to extrude, you'll see it intuitively knows to make it a pipe type of extrusion. If I click back on that curve and drag it outside of the circle and recompute, it's going to give me two separate extrusions. The most important thing to note here is both of these extrusions are seen as one element in the construction tree, with two circles defining each of them. So I can't move one of these circles separate from the other without first performing another function to it. So not only can extrusion be used for one curve, it can be used for multiple curves. And the way the extrusion will function is based on how those curves are related to one another. Alright, final recap on extrusion. I can pre-select the curve I wish to extrude. I can change the direction I want the extrusion to go. I can change the distance I wish the extrusion to be. I can add a taper based on an angle to the extrusion in inner direction or switch it to outward direction. And finally, I can have the extrusion go in both sides, either symmetrically or different assigned values. Okay, moving on, we're going to look at the second tool in the Construct toolbar. To work with Revolve, I'm going to quickly switch into the jeweler's bench and make a stone. 1 carat, and validate that. So now I have the stone sitting in the center of my workspace, and I'm going to make a sketch on the front view plane. From the sketch, I'm going to draw a profile of the bezel that I want to make for this stone. So I'm going to use my segment tool and just quickly draw in the cross section of this bezel. Do an auto connect so I have one closed spline in my tree. Exit the sketch and go back to the solid module. So Revolve works with axis. In this case, I'm going to use my OZ axis and select the cross section I just drew and choose Revolve. Looking at my properties, you see it's pretty straightforward. I have caps ends again. I have the curve to sweep, the axis, and the angle. I'm going to leave it at 360 and validate. If I hide the stone, you see it took my cross section and revolved it 360 degrees around the OZ axis. Let's look at some of the other options here. If I change it to 180 degree, you see now it revolved it 180 degree around that axis. Double click back on, change it to, if I change that to reverse direction, it's going to put the 180 degree revolve in the other direction. Double clicking back, change it back to 360, and validate. Let's go back into my sketch and look at another interesting example of revolve. I'm going to turn my grid snaps on, and I'm going to use a NURB, and I'm going to make an open curve. It's kind of a zigzag curve. But I'm going to make sure that my starting point, x value is 0 and z value is 0. And my end point, x value is 0 and z value is 0. When I leave the sketch, if I choose that open curve and the axis and revolve, I get a closed solid. You can check that with my part doctor. And you see my solid is true. Validate back on there. We're going to click back on that revolved solid and change it to 180. You'll notice here that my revolve is no longer solid and it is a surface. The reason for this is that this curve is not closed. But when we revolve it 360 degrees, it closes in on itself to give us a solid. So to avoid this problem, if you want to do a half revolve, simply make sure the curve is closed and auto connect into one closed NURB. And now revolve 180 degree, and I get a solid. Just kind of interesting to note that a lot of times if I'm revolving something starting from 0 at the center point, I'll leave it an open curve. But if I wanted to do a half revolve, you're going to have to be sure to close that curve so you end up with a solid. To wrap it up, we have revolve. You choose your material. You have capped ends. Curve to sweep. You can only choose one curve in a revolve. You choose your axis and the angle that you want to revolve through. This concludes the first part of Solid Module Fundamentals. I hope maybe you saw some things you've never seen before. In the next Solid Module Fundamentals, we're going to look at sweeping, 1-path, 2-path, and 3-path sweeps. That should be coming out sometime in June, so keep an eye out for that. And yeah, get up on the forum, start talking about this stuff. If I missed anything, if you guys know any tricks that I didn't touch on, let's get a dialogue going on the forum. If you have any questions about the forum, feel free to contact your local territory manager. They'll help you get set up on there. And thanks a lot for taking the time to watch the video demonstration series from 3 Design. I'm Joshua St. John, 3 Design NYC, and we'll see you next time.